Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko leaves absolutely no doubt. The Sounders rule the region. Seattle Sounders is campeón. It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Overcome seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. It is Friday, so we are here with Niko Moreno for another week of what we learned this week. We're doing it a little different this time. For full disclosure, we are recording this first part of the episode before practice because practice starts late and I have a train to catch later. So we're trying to bang this out as much as we can. But Niko, thank you for being here early.
Hey, no, I appreciate it. As always, I'm going to modify my schedule to make sure that the audience gets this podcast pretty consistently. And when you have things going on, I got things going on. We're both fathers. We're both, we got other things going on. So,
we're important people.
You are sure. I don't know about important, but, somewhat. And the team also, they ended up pushing back their training session. So that also went back and forth with why we decided to go this route on it. And and we have enough to talk about this week where we don't usually get a midweek game, and that is something that we actually have this time.
Learn, you talk about what you learn, although I don't know, I guess we can debate how much we really learn, but you learn something. You probably learn more from watching games than from practice either way. So this is a good time to record this, and if we have time, we're going to come back in a second segment and we're going to talk about the Portland game, but let's start talking about this LAFC game. 4-0 loss, worst loss of the season. One of their worst losses in a long time, really. But I think the scoreline was also a little deceiving. It was 1-0 at halftime. Sounders actually, I thought, the last 20 minutes of the first half were in the game. They were a little unlucky not to get a goal. Pedro de la Vega hit a open header off the crossbar. Danny Leyva, this was before the last 20 minutes, but Danny Leyva's free kick, man, I'll tell you, when he stood over that thing, I was excited because that was taken from the exact spot that he practices free kicks every single day. And it came as close. I mean, it was wide by the smallest margin. And I mean, it took a deflection, but man, that would have been a sweet little way to get his free. That was been his first goal.
I know. It is kind of hard to even fathom that he's been a player this long, that is a creative player, is an attacking player with such a good foot, and still hasn't got his first professional goal. But no, I agree with everything you said. I thought that this game, the scoreline doesn't tell you the entirety of the story of the game. And regardless of, yes, it was a bad loss when it comes to the result, but the amount of just overreaction over this specific result is just mind-boggling. I heard someone in the broadcast say this was a statement win for LAFC, and I'm thinking,
what statement?
A statement win? A midweek game against a Sounders team that was heavily rotated. Yeah. That's a statement win? I mean, it just seems ludicrous, right? And the same goes for the Sounders side, right? Oh, this is awful. This is terrible. The depth is abysmal. This is what Sounder Hart and everybody was saying saying this was the most talented team or the deepest team. So there's a lot of context that I hope we get to. But at the end of the day, what I want everybody to know is that this game, and let's put this into consideration. What other game is more compelling for Brian Smetzer to, one, rest his players and maybe take a look at a group of players that either haven't gotten a lot of minutes or haven't had any minutes? This was the perfect time. Yeah. If you were going to put it out there and try to see what certain players were going to provide you, this was the game to do it. Did it work necessarily? No. Maybe it went a little bit away. It got away from you a little bit, but the intent was to go out there and be competitive. And, you got guys like JP that are experienced players. A guy the lineup in general seemed like it had some components there. Obviously, you got some guys like Osasa Dosar that were going to get their first start, and that's all right. But you want to see what these guys have in store for you so you can figure out things moving forward. So just to end my rant, this is what I want to say. Nobody's going to remember a loss in May against LAFC on the road, but what they would remember is you forcing a lineup one more time, getting an injury to a key player, or just getting a team that has already played a lot of minutes more tired into a Portland game that perhaps could be a bigger game because of the rivalry, because of the way that it's set up, because it's clearly a team that's right above you, and it just has a different feel to it. So I just feel like it is a loser mentality for Brian Smetzer and the Seattle Sounders to think just because it's LAFC, I have to prove something. I have to prove something. I have to risk my team. That would be a loser mentality, not trusting your team and hoping that it's competitive.
Yeah, and I think to the degree, if there's a disappointment broadly, it's more that the Sounders and LAFC have now played twice. They face each other both times in the middle of fixture congestion. They've both rotated their lineups, and they've both blown each other out, and we really don't know anything about how these two teams match up when they're both full strength.
Yeah.
Like the last time, and I think one of the other things that has bugged me a little bit in the discourse around this game is I saw a lot of people saying, like, well, what do you expect when you put out a lineup like that? And I think two things can be true. One is, I think the Sounders had every reasonable expectation to think that this lineup would be competitive. This was almost the exact same lineup that beat LAFC 5-2. Now, the difference is that LAFC in the first game was much more heavily rotated than they were in this game. This was pretty close. They rotated from the weekend, but it was pretty close to like a first choice group.
I agree.
So that was not a fair comparison. Like, obviously, LAFC came out with a different mentality, but they were at home. That what I think is a big deal. And
they're coming from a disappointing 2-2 draw.
They were coming out with a disappointing 2-2 draw. The Sounders, frankly, I think were looking at this game as house money. If they could get a result, great. They did not feel like they needed a result in this game. I think they made a calculated gamble to rotate and also I'll also note one other thing. LAFC has another day of rest after this one, so that allowed them a little bit more flexibility. And they also aren't traveling anywhere. I don't even know if that game is in LA, who's the host, but either way, they're not leaving LA.
Sure.
So it's just like it's a completely different. Like the Sounders had to come back, and they're going to have to travel to whatever. I do think that there's something to be. We can talk about all these different lineup decisions and what we learned to individual players, but the big picture is I just don't think I feel any differently about this team today than I felt about a week ago.
As you shouldn't.
Because we didn't all we learned is that LAFC's best team is a lot better than the Sounders' second best team. And I don't know but when these teams, if they meet in the playoffs, will not look like the way that they will both have different lineups. Vastly different lineups.
And the criticism on depth goes a little bit to what you said. Like depth, it depends on, and look, this is coming from somebody who's been, not to toot my own horn, but I've done a lot of radio in my time. I spent a lot of time with guys who know a lot more about the game than I do across the table. And if there's something that I learned over guys who've done it, who've been real professionals, who are real coaches, is that when you're talking about depth, it's very subjective, especially when you have no idea about the ins and outs of an organization. So when it comes to depth, people what do they expect? A whole B team to be just as good as the first team? Nobody's saying that.
That's not the right.
No, depth is just simply saying, hey, we have players in this team
that we feel good about.
That we feel really good about. That if someone needs to rest, is injured, we got to make adjustments. There is quality on the bench, and that was absolutely obvious, and that continues to be the case for this team. But nobody's saying that if there's 8 changes to a lineup, there's going to be an obvious
drop off.
A drop off, and especially the continuity, right? The chemistry, the things that we saw on the field, and we'll get into the individual performances. But all of those were part of just having a team that hasn't really played together. So beyond the talent is that alone.
And I would say along that same point, it's one thing if you are playing 2 games a week for a long period of time and you're changing that lineup from one game, and so that both teams are getting a lot of reps. This team had not played together effectively since the LAFC game. Like, there was a lot of the same pieces that were in the. Now they had all played at various times, but like as a unit, they just had not really played together, with the exception of Osaze de Rosario. But it's just, I think we just have to give some grace, I think, in terms of what was realistically expected. And I don't know that the Sounders thought that LAFC would rotate more heavily than they did, but honestly, they have to make the decision that's right for them. They can't get worried about like, well, if LAFC rolls out their first choice lineup, we're going to get smashed. That can't be part of the equation.
Absolutely not.
If they think guys need rest, if Christian Roldan didn't travel, Stefan Frey didn't travel, I mean, that should tell you a lot about what the mentality of what this team was. I will say the one change that I would have liked to have seen, in part because, and I think I said this after the RSL game, I think I saw this when I saw the lineup in this game. Look, if you're going to put out a group that is already playing from a deficit, I think maybe I would like to see Stu Hawkins start in the middle and put John Bell on the left of that 3, because I do think that would be a real learning. Now, is that that might be a no-win situation for Stu Hawkins. Maybe it's unfair to him, but it would have been an interesting little wrinkle. I think if we've learned one thing, I think maybe John Bell is not best suited to be playing in the middle of a back 3.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree. I said that Thursday. That is incredible. Those were the words out of my mouth. It is clear that, especially if you're going to play with a 3-man backline, Jay Bell cannot be that guy. Look, to me, Bell is
a good player.
He's a good player, good defender.
He's really a Nuhu replacement.
Exactly, and that, I don't think people realize that to me, and not even necessarily to the point of new, because, well, I guess so, yes, because he's what I would call a stay-home fullback, right, on the left side. That's where he's best suited, and that's what when he's played in the 3-man back line, he's looked good. When he plays outside of that middle, when you got Jackson Reagan being the guy that's managing the ball, that's holding possession, that he's the one that's trying to break lines with the ball, that works. But when you're the guy that has to do all of it, he was pretty bad in this one, and we'll get into it. I'll say one last thing about the overall general sense into this game. It's a 3-game road trip. We said this, right? I think Seattle's handled it perfectly. You go to Houston, you guarantee yourself points.
You do what you can to guarantee, exactly.
Because
you put your best foot forward.
You put your best foot forward. It's your
most winnable. Of all the 3 games, that was the game where you had the best chance to win. Make sure you secure those points.
And you did.
You did.
So you did. So it's going perfectly to plan. The second game, you're going to rotate. You're going to hope that you're competitive. You're going to hope that you get a result. It didn't quite go that route. I agree that the game, the scoreline at the end specifically, 4-0, whatever. I get people, if you want to lose your mind about it, go ahead. I've always said it is your prerogative to lose your mind and say this is the worst team in the planet because they decided to rotate on Wednesday at LAFC.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is what you just said a couple of minutes ago. You should feel no different about this team than you did a week ago. And the same thing goes for LAFC.
I don't think Steve Cherundolo is going like, oh, we got the Sounders number.
Exactly. Come on now. I mean, let's be realistic, right? So that's all I want to provide is a different perspective for you at home or at your car or wherever you're listening to this. just to have a different contrast and decide where you lie. That's okay.
Right.
If you still want to lose your mind, go ahead. But I just feel like I've done my job by ranting about it. I actually feel really good now that I've got it off my chest. And, if there's people out there that decide that their way of informing people is by losing their mind and getting into clickbait and all this craziness, then go ahead and watch it. But here, we're always going to be neutral. We're always going to, and neutral in the sense of just having an understanding of what's really happening.
Right, yeah.
We're going to have a real take on what we see and what we really believe onto what's going on.
We like to think of this as your favorite reality-based podcast.
There you go. I like it. That's beautiful. Beautifully put. Yes.
That said, there were some individual performances that I think are worth digging into. We talked a little bit about John Bell, but on the positive side, I was encouraged by Kalani Kosarienzi's performance. He ended up getting left on an island a few times with Benny Bouanga, and he basically held his own. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he shut Bouanga down, but he never looked like he was overwhelmed. I think he was okay in possession for the most part. He was good going forward. And I think there is still a sort of working assumption within the Sounders that he's more suited as a wingback than as a fullback. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably fair, but I think this was a good test for him that he can be trusted even when he is sometimes a little exposed. And so that was one positive development. He also, he had a goal line clearance that was as good of a clearance as you'll see. Just kind of it ended up not really mattering, I suppose, but Denny Bouanga had a pretty nice move, and he was able to come in, slide in off the weak side, and clear it off the line. I was very impressed by that. At times he looked like the player who was most out there trying to prove something. And then the other player who I was actually, and I don't know, maybe the opinions will be a little different on this, but I thought Osaze de Rosario did pretty good, especially considering he was really on an island, did not have a lot of help, and he was still able to get himself into some dangerous positions. He wasn't perfect.
No, he was okay.
He was okay, but he had a couple good hold-up plays. He got one really good look at a header that maybe he could have done a little better with, but he put it on frame, and he had one shot from distance that was well hit. But I think, again, if he's your third option at striker, I feel okay about that.
Sure. And that's what you brought him on for. So I'll touch on both of those, and I'll give you two different guys to look into. But I thought Kosa, especially going forward, was very selective, was very good. And when it comes to being a fullback, I think that's things that he's going to grow into. And if there is something that perhaps I didn't necessarily agree, but I understood later, and that's why I asked the question, was why did the Sounders set up in a 3-4-3 after the 4-2-3-1 had been working? Yeah. And it's it is a fair tactic to want to set up, when it comes to your formation, to even out that three attacking guys from LAFC's 4-3-3 with three defenders. It's a numerical thing that happens very normally before a game when you're going against a team that runs the 4-3-3. So for me, it's understandable. But when it comes to Kosarienzi, in the second half, and Brian mentioned this, they went back to the forward back line. And I thought as a fullback, he did well. So Kosarienzi has a lot of promise. Obviously, I still feel like Alex is the guy, but
especially in a 4-2-3-1. But
this is your guy for the future, and I think you can mold him into that. And I really like that. I wasn't so high when it came to Osaze de Rosario, just simply because of somewhat pressing triggers, obviously. Yeah. So the goal, can he get out there a lot sooner to press that guy that is at the top of the box? Absolutely. I mean, there were things that, he's a young player, so I'm not going to kill him for it. I just thought he was okay. I thought, and we might defer on this one, because I've heard different thought process on it, but I thought Pedro was engaging. I thought Pedro was trying. I thought Pedro de la Vega was influential. He was the guy that seemed more committed to
he wanted to try to make
maker. And that's important to me, right? It wasn't perfect. There was a couple, if not more than that, of bad passes. There is the goal, the second goal,
where he gets the turnover.
And it's just a beautiful pass by.
I don't know how much I was going back and forth on how much of that I put on him, because he does sort of make he makes a long run, and he ends up getting dispossessed. And on one hand, making runs like that can have the effect of unbalancing a defense, but on the other hand, it also unbalances you to defend the counter, and the Sounders got killed on that counter. I don't know. Again, I think you have to. If you're going to put Pedro on the field, you have to be aware that he's going to do that. That's part of what he does, and you have to be. So I don't really put that too much on him. I with you though. I did like that he was willing to try to push the game and to do things. I was a little surprised how long he was on the field, because I sort of assumed he would start against Portland, which I don't think will be the case now. We'll see. Maybe Georgie gets to start, and that wouldn't be the worst. That would be an interesting. Georgie has looked pretty good against Portland, so that would make some sense there. But go ahead.
I would like to see Pedro, but
I just don't know if he'll play again he played 45 minutes against Dynamo. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what they do with them there.
And then when it comes to the bad, because you mentioned one bad, one good with Jay Bell, I would say that other than Jay Bell, who to me was probably the one that had the most unimpressive showing, Jesus Ferreira had a really tough time finding the ball.
He had a really tough time finding the ball.
And I hate to put it on Andrew Thomas, but I feel like he was also very lethargic during the game. And it's not just the goals. It was just certain moments where he just wasn't commanding that box, and he was just unable to get on the ball quicker. You know, those little things that you want to see from your goalkeeper of the future.
Yeah, and talk about the first goal, which is the one I think it's easiest to put on him. I guess it does take a deflection off Nuhu. It still gets a lot of Andrew Thomas, and I'm not gonna beat him up too much for that, because it is a tough. But like if you can get your body almost behind the ball, and that's kind of what happened, you got to figure out how to keep it out of the goal. That he's not the only person. The bigger maybe problem is that Under got the open shot
with a bunch of time,
with too much time and space. So I don't know. I agree with you though, and I will say also, I thought JP got a lot of criticism in this game, and I don't want to sit here and say he was great, but I also think there was a lot of mitigating circumstances around here, and I'm not at all convinced that people were like, oh, well, clearly he can't be your number 6. And it's like, well, he's not the number 6, but he's played plenty of other games where he's looked better than he did in this game.
Another overreaction.
I just think you got to sometimes take a step back. Was he good in this game? Not really. Am I worried about him going forward? Not that much. Like, he's still...
No.
Like, there is some maybe fair concerns about, okay, if they do sell Obed in the summer, what's the plan going forward from there? That's a fair concern, but that's also one of those things where it's like, maybe I don't know. I'm not worried about it that much right now. I will also note that it had been a month, I think, since JP had played.
Yep.
It's tough to. I think if anything, I would like to see him get just some more spot minutes, not necessarily starts, but just getting him on the field, getting him in the pace of the game a little bit more. And
he has 314 minutes, including this 90. So he was below 200 before that. It's difficult. And to your point,
and most of those were early in the season when they were in Champions Cup.
Earlier in the season,
right.
And once again, I thought when he looked more maybe out of his range was in the first half under the 3-4-3, where there was so much issues because look, another thing that went really wrong for the Sounders was that their pressing was non-efficient.
Easily their worst
non-efficient.
It was almost to the point where it didn't even seem like they were really pressing, and that is not. This has been a team who has kind of developed into a pressing team this year, and it was a very ineffective press. I will also say that LAFC's press was the most effective anyone has pressed the Sounders this year. again, facing a very much a B team. But that was a very effective press that LAFC. Kudos to them. They deserve credit for that. They came in with a game plan. They executed it well. Mission accomplished for LAFC. I just don't think we can make too many I don't think we can take almost any big picture ideas out of this game. And I think it's kind of like okay, on to the next one.
And that's kind of the thing. So and just to kind of conclude the point that we're talking about is JP. I think that anybody who, and I heard it, I saw it, and I did everything in my power to not engage was JP's done. He should never been brought back. He is too old. I can cuss here, right?
Sure.
Shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up when it comes to saying things like that off of one game when a player is obviously needed some more minutes. He's getting them now. Just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I definitely cannot agree more with that sentiment. It's probably a good place to call a break. Hopefully we'll come back with a second segment. If we have time, we will come back and do a second segment. If not, I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is Niko Moreno. This is Nos Arietes. And hopefully we'll be right back. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So we are going to record a second segment. The Sounders still are not out at training. Not that people need to know that, but we're going to let's talk about Portland a little bit. Portland is also in the midst of, this is a strange week for MLS to do so-called rivalry week, where there are midweek, almost everyone played midweek games, including the Timbers played at RSL, right?
Yes.
They tied 0-0. I don't know much about what happened in that game other than it was a 0-0 tie. I would imagine that they did not use their first choice lineup in that game. They
did not. They rotated. The funny part about that one when I was watching it is that there was a lot of components of that U.S. Open Cup team was here against the Tacoma Defiance. But yeah, they rotated.
Okay. So this is probably going to be a reasonably well-rested and first-choice group for Portland, just like it should be a reasonably well-rested and first-choice group for the Sounders. I suppose that sets up how you want this game from a neutral perspective. What can we say about Portland this year? They seem to have taken a step forward from last year. Mm-hmm. They have somewhat figured out the defense. They are still pretty dangerous going forward. Not maybe quite as explosive. DaCosta is definitely a step down from Evander, from a pure danger man type of perspective. But this is still a team that looks dangerous. They have a lot. Jonathan Rodriguez has been limited to injury, but still causing a lot of problems for opposing defenses. Antony is a effective attacking piece. Moreno is they have got Felipe Mora is sort of like a kind of a knockoff Danny Musovski.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, there you go.
But they kind of do their jobs very similarly, where they kind of are just very good at getting into dangerous spots. What do you know? What do you think of Portland? I mean, they're second and third in the table.
Yeah. So I've said this maybe way too much because of the U.S. Open Cup and things like that, but they're a team that understand their weaknesses and do what they do best very consistently. So they know where the strengths are and they focus on that. And when it comes to their weaknesses, they try to minimize those. In the last 2 games, I've seen them play more of a mid-block because they understand how much they're exposed a lot of the times when they're a little too high. And that's credit to Phil Neville. I think that they have realized that as a collective, they can, without a doubt, replace or mimic what Evander provided to this team, and they've actually been better when it came
more balance,
right? Because before they depended a whole lot on Evander, and if there are 2 guys that have stepped up and played even better than they ever had with the Timbers, is Anthony, who is my number 1 player to watch. I think that he is their most dangerous player. 4 goals, 7 assists. But beyond the statistics, he's a guy that's going to wear you down because he could do so many things on the ball. And he cannot just beat you one way. He could beat you 6 ways. I've seen this guy do a sombrerito, like a little flick over the top of a defender at the end line without any space. I mean, the guy's creativity is off the charts, and this year is at its biggest display. So as a unit, they've been able to really replace what Evander did, the magical component. So that he's my number 1 guy to watch. Second guy is Da Costa. Da Costa is more of the brains of the operation, the guy that's putting balls through, the guy that's going to be at the end of most set pieces.
Kind of an Albert Rusnak type of game.
Kind of an Albert Rusnak type of player, perhaps a little bit more athletic, but definitely a guy that has those same...
He's not a flashy player.
Not a flashy player,
but
correct.
He does the job well. He is efficient. He can put a shot away if he gets it. He's not a shot. He doesn't make his own shot necessarily.
Nope.
But he's good at making the right pass.
Yep. And then Felipe Mora. And it should be no surprise that they're all attacking players because that's their main components. Although I think Crepeau coming back, and he is a guy that, because of the way that they play direct, having a guy that has his type of distribution, he really helps his team out. So I think Mexico Poe is another important guy, but Felipe Mora is a guy that Seattle's going to have issues with. He's a guy that likes to play against the Sounders. I've heard him from his own voice that he plays at a different level when he plays against the Sounders.
He's had some good performances.
Some very good performances. So he's a guy that Yeimar knows well. He's a guy that I feel like there is a little bit of a competition there, but he's going to play at a different level when it comes to the Sounders. So a couple of other notes from their last game. Diego Chara played some minutes. He came in the 61st minute. He'd been injured, leg injury for quite a long time. He looked pretty good, and he's a guy that is another one.
He's like 52 years old.
I know, but he plays like he's 25. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure this is his goodbye tour, but a guy that is a problem nonetheless. Don't think he'll start, but if things get complicated for the Timbers, you best believe that he's going to be on the field. And then Jonathan Rodriguez also came in the 61st minute, and he's a guy that has been injured, that has came on.
But he's kind of been a super sub for them.
He's been a super sub for them, but this is a team that, once again, a lot of it goes offensively. But going back to their weaknesses, in the last couple of games, they've been able to hold clean sheets because of the way they've been a lot more conservative, pushing forward guys like Bravo.
They only
guys
have
like
one goal in
Mosquera.
those 2 games.
And they have one beautiful goal by Santiago Moreno.
Yeah, absolute goal of the year candidate. If not for Kevin Dankey's unbelievable bike, I would say that would be a very good contender for goal of the year, that goal that he had. I would say the other reason for skepticism, and this is not necessarily a commentary on how well they've played, but I do think if there's some doubt about how for real the Timbers are, it's that a lot of games against bottom of the table teams, they have, by most metrics, the weakest opponent schedule faced up to this point so far. Fully a third of their games have come against the LA Galaxy and Sporting Kansas City, who are 2 of the worst teams in the league. They just, again, came off a game against RSL, who's in a very bad place right now. Although, I don't know, they got a result at RSL, which is something that the Sounders don't do very often. So, hey, who am I to say? But this is a team where I think we still they haven't been tested the way that I think the Sounders even have been tested, where they've played some top teams and they have, had to hold their own. So it'll be, I do think, as always, it's always an interesting matchup. I still think this is, it's funny. Our friends at SoccerWise did a ranking of the top rivalries in MLS, and sort of the general consensus is that Cascadia is still near the top, but maybe not the top rivalry right now. And I think that's mainly because this rivalry has just not had a lot of juice in the last few years. They're just, the teams have been good, but the games haven't necessarily been super entertaining. I don't know. This one feels like maybe it could be fun. This feels like a two teams who maybe match up in a more interesting way than they have in the past.
Yeah, and I understand, not necessarily, because it really bothers me when people don't think that the Cascadia Timbers Sounders rivalry is the best in MLS. I mean, it bothers me, and I understand.
It is by such a large portion the most historic rivalry in American soccer. There is not really a good, maybe Sounders Whitecaps might be a close second, but there's obviously there's not nearly the fire in that one. In terms of this is the most organic, long-standing, this is the closest thing we have to a proper derby in American soccer.
And I'm okay with that. And I'm not just okay with that, I love that. What bothers me is when we have an LA Galaxy team that's yet to win and has the worst start in MLS history, people are saying that that's the best derby going into this weekend.
Yeah,
it just seems ludicrous to me.
That's a silly thing. That's a silly thing. I agree. I saw the same thing. Now, the Hell is Real derby, I think, is definitely the one. That has been a lot of fun. That's, of course, the Columbus-Cincinnati rivalry. I'm not going to throw any shade on that other than it just doesn't have a lot of history, but it has real animosity. It has, in the recent years, they've been two of the best teams in the league. It has a lot of juice right now. I don't have anything to say. Both stadiums get really exciting, really fun. I have nothing but nice. That's a great rivalry. And then honestly, after that, it falls off a lot. Like the Hudson River Derby is not anything right now. Maybe the Canadian Classique is a nice derby, but what are we doing here? We're talking about Canada.
Yeah, exactly. No, the Orlando-Miami one is
has some
interesting.
potential.
I like that one going into this week because Messi has looked frustrated because Orlando's been a juggernaut over the last couple of weeks. 4 games they've been undefeated. I think Ojeda has played himself into MVP conversations. That's a good team against a Inter Miami team that's always going to be interesting because the Messi factor.
What did you make of Messi actually playing in PayPal Park against San Jose? I thought that was actually kind of cool. I am not like a Messi. I don't really track Messi that much, but I do find something really neat about him playing. Like I respect the Earthquakes have made a lot of really questionable decisions forever, really, but committing to play that game at PayPal Park, I thought was actually really clever. Midweek game, so maybe that helped the decision. They probably didn't. I'm sure they didn't know if Messi was going to be there or not. But that Messi played ended up being cool. Like as a Bay Area guy, I thought it was kind of a neat thing. I guess he hadn't played in the Bay Area in like 10 years since he played some random tournament there a while back. But so that was kind of a cool little thing. Speaking of Galaxy, though, and I feel like we should just mention this since we have Niko Moreno. You have you're a commentary guy. Greg Vanney officially signed his extension today. Going to be there till 2028. The more notable thing maybe about that is friend of the pod, friend of the Sounders, former Sounders assistant GM Robbie Remanini is now the director of qualitative analytics, I believe is what they call it.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so that was kind of a neat little feather in his cap. What did you make, though, of Greg Vanney? Like, I was a little surprised that the timing of it feels a little weird. A little weird. They're coming 13 games into the season without a win. Just blew a 2-0 lead. It seems like maybe one of those ones that hold onto your hat a little bit. I don't know. Maybe their hand was forced. It did get reported by a couple different outlets before it was official, but I don't know. What do you make of that?
It's what I like to call the cushion of an MLS Cup. That's really it. And a team that, in my opinion, would only be compounding the problems by letting go of Greg Vanney, regardless of the results. And they've been as bad as they could possibly be. Greg Vanney has not lost one sense of the respect of the locker room, and I know this with inside information. Greg Vanney is also a guy that, to me, radiates a lot of confidence, where I would feel like he knows and understands this league vastly. So I think it's a good choice with what you have, because what's the other thing you can do? Go and try to find another Guillermo Escaloto from like South America because he's a big name, and then come and flake
they've
out.
tried a few different things. I don't. I think that's a very relevant question. Is if you fire Greg Vanney,
what do you do?
What do you do? And you can. Because you can make the case in a vacuum, sure, he should be fired. They're 13 games winless. That's the way it goes. But then what are you going to do next? And I don't know, hire Peter Vermees? You're going to hire Jim Curtin?
Yeah.
Jim Curtin? I mean, or are you going to go, like you said, are you going to go find another Guillermo Scalotto where you really don't know what you're going to get? They've already tried that path. It's a complicated thing. So, I don't know. I think the timing is a little weird, but whatever. I mean, I suppose it would have been good to get this done in the offseason, and then no one would have questioned it.
Yeah.
But
a lot of good rivalries, and I think this all goes and ties in perfectly into it. Once again, I feel like this could be a trap game for LAFC, and I think that people who kind of doing a full circle of what we started had a lot of huge conclusions from this win. I feel like if it goes sideways on LAFC this weekend, I'm going to be the happiest man alive.
I would not be at all surprised if LA Galaxy win this game.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We do this on Thursdays where we like put money certain. We talk about odds and things like that. And of course, all the odds are with LAFC, but they're not as high as you think.
No,
the reason of it is because you feel like this could be a trap game. So, man, do with it as you will. But to me, that's going to be an interesting game to follow. And I have a feeling, and not enough for me to be financially tied to it, but I do have a feeling that LA Galaxy could trap LAFC.
Well, let's close out with a note about Sounders here.
Yeah.
How do you feel going into this game? Do you feel reasonably confident?
Thank you for the question, because I've been dying to get it out. I'm confident in the Sounders, man. And if you know me, you should know that that's a big deal.
Yeah, you're a hater.
Because I'm the hater. I'm the one that, why would you say that, Niko? You're just not a Sounders guy. I'm not a hater. I really see it as I feel it. And I think that this team, like we have been discussing the entirety of this podcast today, it was a calculated risk to put all your eggs in the basket of Timbers. And to me, watching both teams closely this season, I watch 90 minutes of both Timbers and the Sounders just about every week. Maybe I missed once of the Timbers. Seattle's the better balanced team.
Yeah.
And I think that Seattle defensively can really limit what Timber does well. They're going to want to go wide. They're going to want to go direct. They want to have a lot of speed. And they're a team that, like you said, and it was a fantastic point, they have not been tested to the way that the Sounders have been tested. The Sounders have been down on the grind. They've had to pull in games. The Timbers haven't. And quite the opposite. They showed us against LAFC, against Vancouver, that they have a hard time holding on to leads.
San Jose.
Against San Jose. I mean, this is a team that has some difficulties really following through the 90 minutes. And Seattle is quite the opposite. They've been good on the road. They won in Houston. I think they can go to Portland and do some damage. I feel good about it. I feel like the Sounders are going to get a statement win. And
we're going to forget about LAFC immediately.
And I'm going to get to laugh at people for the LAFC. And that would be best case scenario. But regardless of, I think Seattle has a very good percentage to win this game regardless of, and I feel like it's going to be a good performance no matter what. I see a team here that's confident, that understand what it takes to win, and I feel like you're going to see that at Providence Park on the weekend.
Well, that's a great note to end this on. I'm Jeremiah Oshan, signing off for Niko Moreno, who you can find on Soccer Down Here, who you can find on Pulso Sports, who you can, of course, hear on Lobbing Scorchers and Nos Arietes. Thanks for joining me again on another episode of What We Learned This Week with Niko. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated. to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party. You guys like that? No. Awkward joke, dad joke right there, huh?